Yooka Laylee is one of those titles that will always be compared to the games that inspired it. Forever linked with Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie, this crowdfunded nostalgia trip borrows elements from each of its spiritual predecessors in an attempt to capture the spirit of those classic N64 platformers. The result is 5 vibrant and colorful levels that bring the player on a journey back to the era of collectathons that defined a console generation, for better or for worse. With the game about to celebrate its 5th anniversary, I thought it would be appropriate to explore each stage as I have for both Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie to try and answer the question of which world is best and which world is worst. Before we get started, don't forget to let me know what you think Yooka Laylee's best world is in the comments down below, and remember, if you like this type of content, to subscribe and like the video. With that out of the way, welcome to every Yooka Laylee world ranked. While the nostalgia rush players of old-school collectathons experience can mask many of Tribal Stack Tropics' shortcomings, Yooka Laylee's second world doesn't get to benefit from that same luxury. Instead, the experience of Glitter Glaze Glacier, and the rest of Yooka Laylee to an extent, is kind of like listening to a tribute band play one of your favorite songs. All the notes and lyrics are there, and nothing is inherently wrong with what you're seeing or hearing, but the tone and feel is decidedly different from the original, and certainly nowhere near as captivating. You may not necessarily be able to place it at first, but you know it's lacking something, and I think for Glitter Glaze Glacier, that element that's unfortunately missing is a soul. Although the world is beautiful and the music wonderfully complements it to create a wintry atmosphere, ultimately it feels empty. Not for a lack of things to do, as there are plenty of tasks to complete and collectibles to gather, but because it all feels rather dull. There's a definite lack of personality that separates a snow level like this from a classic like Freeze Easy Peak, and a big part of that has to do with the NPCs and level design. Glitter Glaze Glacier feels about as generic as a snowy level can get, and it's a shame because it feels like they had a few good ideas that just weren't executed properly. Giving the snowmen a few more lines of dialogue each to flesh them out would have made the hat collecting quest a lot more interesting and helped the world feel populated with memorable characters. Likewise, I would have liked to see some of the reoccurring characters comment on the stage that they are in, rather than feeling like they were just copied and pasted from world to world. Additionally, having some more distinct landmarks would have gone a long way to help this level stand out more. Although the castle towers help to provide structure to the level by serving as easily recognizable markers, they seem so plain in comparison to landmarks like the Christmas Tree or Winter Village from Banjo-Kazooie's Freeze Easy Peak, and it's part of why Glitter Glaze Glacier is extremely forgettable. What makes this so disappointing is the fact that Yooka Laylee has a feature where each grand tome can be expanded upon to introduce new ideas or areas to the map, yet nothing innovative is introduced here. Truthfully, the video game Ice World is as trite as concepts can get, and it really needed an interesting gimmick or twist to keep things fresh. This is why Glitter Glaze Glacier has the most disappointing of the Grand Tome expansions, as the Isometric Palace is easily my least favorite section in the game because it doesn't contribute positively to the world. While I have no problem with the isometric point of view, I do take issue with a huge labyrinth that makes finding the world's collectibles significantly more annoying. Part of the allure of a collectathon like this is that you have the freedom to explore every facet of the world that you're in, and restricting the player to a series of unremarkable and hard to distinguish rooms is a surefire way to kill that desire to explore. To me, it's what cements this world's position in the end, because when half of your stage makes the core objective of the game more of a frustrating process than a rewarding one, you know the level has issues. That said, in an attempt to not be completely negative about this stage, I would like to compliment it on introducing the Slurp State ability that is used to solve so many puzzles throughout the adventure. It adds an extra layer of depth to the gameplay that I really appreciate, as it's one of Yooka Laylee's only original abilities. Additionally, Glitter Glaze Glacier has a unique transformation in the form of the snowplow that got a laugh from me, as well as a solid boss fight against Breeze Block in the Isometric Palace. Even so, I can't say that I truly enjoyed Glitter Glaze Glacier, but I wouldn't say that I disliked it either. Instead, in my mind, it is the perfect representation of an average video game level, and one that will certainly get forgotten to the passage of time, which is why it's my pick for Yooka Laylee's worst level. One of the downsides of Yooka Laylee's decision to only include 5 worlds in the game is that they compensated for that low number by filling each world with a ton of collectibles. While on the surface this may seem like a fair compromise, I think it ultimately hurts a world like Moody Maze Marsh, which would have benefited greatly from being a little smaller with a few less objectives to complete. While none of the missions in the world are particularly bad, none of them are very memorable, which is a problem that most of the worlds have, but Moody Maze Marsh particularly so. Having fewer but longer quests would have not only made those missions more noteworthy, but the reward of quills and a pagey would have been more satisfying to receive as a result. As it stands, despite just recently completing the game, I was forced to look up many of the missions in the level as they left little to no impact on me, and I couldn't remember many of them. Part of the problem is that many of the pages revolve around missions we've already seen before. Again, this is not exclusive to just Moody Maze Marsh, but when you are completing your 3rd Cardos mission, or your 6th round of Retro's arcade games, it begins to sink in just how similar the objectives of each world are. Even if many of these challenges can be fun, like the minigames based on platforming through hoops, it starts to feel like filler by the time you've finished your 12th mission of that same type. And oftentimes, like the challenge that sees Yooka Lizard Lash up to the top of a tree, it would have been better to forget the hoops entirely and allow the challenge to be a more organic and immersive experience. However, even if a mission feels natural, it doesn't guarantee that it will be good, as we can see with many of the underwater portions of Moody Maze Marsh. In 2022, the narrative around water levels is about as clearly defined as any subject in gaming is, and I almost always side with the majority of people who agree that aside from a few exceptions, water levels usually disappoint, especially in platforming games. Yooka Laylee is no exception to this rule, as the underwater controls are sluggish and only highlight the shortcomings of Yooka Laylee's gameplay. Thankfully, Moody Maze Marsh is not a full-on water level and only features a few underwater sections, because even with the introduction of the Buddy Bubble ability that lets you sink to the floor and walk around, I still find myself wishing to return to land as soon as possible. On the other hand, one moment that I really enjoyed in this 3rd world was the boss fight against Trev the Tentacle. Although I think nearly every boss in the game is good, Trev stands out the most just because of the brief conversation you have with him before the battle begins. I love the idea that this giant kraken has decided to pick a fight with you because you made him miss the beginning of his favorite show, and that silliness is exactly what I look for in these kinds of games. It also helps that the fight, while simple, is a satisfying multi-phase battle with a good sense of progression. Had Moody Maze Marsh had more moments like this, I sincerely believe it could have been the best level in the game. There was a ton of potential here, and it's a shame that most of it, like the underwhelming piranha transformation, is fun but lasts such a short time that it's quickly forgotten. It doesn't help that they did such an outstanding job with the maze-like design and swampy atmosphere that it actually winds up working against the world, because locales are harder to find and distinguish between, making it even more difficult to remember the level's shorter tasks. In the end, this is what prevents Moody Maze Marsh from getting ranked any higher, because while it doesn't have anything as frustrating as the isometric palace of Glitter Glaze Glacier, it also doesn't have anything quite as noteworthy either, and sometimes I'm honestly not sure what's worse. Coming up with original concepts for a world's theme has to be one of the most challenging things to do as a modern-day video game developer. It seems like every idea has been tried before, and up to Galleon Galaxy, I wasn't particularly impressed with each world's choice of theme. Glitter Glaze Glacier felt like a generic snow world, Moody Maze Marsh felt a little too similar to Bubble Gloop Swamp, Tribal Stack Tropics reminded me of Mayahem Temple, and Capital Casino is, well, just a casino level. But then comes Galleon Galaxy, which is a beautiful space-themed world with an interesting pirate twist that stands out as easily the most memorable theme in Yooka Laylee. Part of what makes this theme work is your ability to transform the Lizard-Bat duo into a pirate ship that can safely sail around the map's dangerous waters. Blasting things with your various cannons or setting things on fire with your flamethrower is satisfying, and usually results in discovering new areas or secrets. Both the boss fight against Planette and the race against Nimble do a great job utilizing these abilities to create fun missions that give Galleon Galaxy character. And whether it's thawing out one of the Ghost Riders to get a pagey or simply zipping around the map on the lookout for treasures, the pirate ship stands out as one of my favorite transformations in any Rare-inspired collectathon. Past its aesthetic and transformation, Galleon Galaxy also excels by having a nice open level design that grants the player the freedom to explore wherever they desire. It's a nice change of pace to be able to collect everything the level has to offer as soon as you expand it, and not have your progression blocked with the requirement of a new ability. While I can see some being a little disenfranchised by the fact that you can simply fly everywhere, making platforming often feel like an afterthought outside the level's challenges, I felt liberated and grateful that I didn't run into any roadblocks that stopped me from doing what I wanted to do. In this way, I feel Galleon Galaxy does a great job in its role as the final world, as it prepares you for the final battle by showing you how you're ready for any challenge that's thrown your way. Unfortunately, much like Moody Maze Marsh, this fifth world falters in its decision to stay committed to the various reoccurring missions seen throughout the game. It just feels like a waste of time to complete yet another Kartos mission, as the challenge has long since gone away by this point, and the novelty of a Donkey Kong Country style kart riding section has faded. Similarly, I don't understand why we are forced to complete more golf-based minigames, as there doesn't seem to be any logical reason why we should be seeing this objective reappear. Then factor in the uninspired Flappy Bird ripoff in Rexro's Arcade, and the lackluster utilization of Shovel Knight and the Knights of Hamelot, and it becomes clear that the developers were simply out of interesting ideas. Overall, I like Galleon Galaxy, but despite being a slightly above average level, it feels like it still failed to live up to its potential. With a theme as cool as Space Pirates, I believe this could have gone down as one of the best levels in any collectathon, but it winds up just being good instead of great. While I genuinely enjoyed certain aspects of this world, I think a lot was left on the table by not coming up with more original ideas and shoehorning in stale concepts. I also think the stage could have been slightly smaller, as even with the various warp tubes, it can still feel like there's a lot of empty space that should be filled with something. Even so, I did enjoy my time in Galleon Galaxy, and I hope that if we ever get a Yooka Laylee 2 or a Banjo 3 in the future, that they can continue to come up with concepts as interesting as what we see here. I have to admit that when I went into Tribal Stack Tropics for the first time, I did so with apprehension. Banjo-Kazooie is one of my favorite platformers of all time, and knowing the reputation of Yooka Laylee made me nervous that I would be immediately disappointed in what I saw. In this way, I feel my experience was probably quite the opposite from those who backed the game on Kickstarter originally, as I didn't have boundless excitement for what I was about to experience. Fortunately, I think this worked to my benefit, as I was pleasantly surprised to discover a perfectly competent and polished world filled to the brim with places to explore and collectibles to find. I could easily see why Tribal Stack Tropics would be a lot of people's picks for the best stage in the game, because it starts off the main world so strongly. The level is absolutely gorgeous, with plenty of distinct features that invite the player to explore and discover what separates Yooka Laylee from its predecessors. It's the perfect blend of nostalgia and innovation, as there is just enough original content to get the player excited for what's to come next, while relaxing them into it with familiar concepts and controls. Among the new ideas introduced here, the ability to expand the Grand Tomes really stood out as an ingenious concept that made me that much more motivated to find all the pages I could. The reward of new areas is exciting and enticing, and to its credit, Tribal Stack Tropics easily has the best execution of this idea. Although each expansion adds new areas and collectibles for the player to find, what sets Tribal Stack Tropics apart from the rest of the levels in the game is its balance. Unlike Galleon Galaxy, where there's virtually nothing to do in the pre-expansion version of the level, or the remaining levels whose expansions don't feel quite significant enough, Tribal Stack really feels like it has two equal acts, each with their own unique features and set pieces. There are nearly the same number of pages and quills to collect in each form of the level, and it helps prevent one section from feeling more important than the other. This keeps the flow of gameplay moving, as you aren't stuck in one section for too long, which is a crucial part in keeping the moment-to-moment gameplay fun. This may be the strongest aspect of Yooka Laylee's first level, as it feels like no matter what direction you go in when you enter the world, you'll wind up finding something of note. There are hoop challenges to find that don't feel contrived yet, pieces of a pagey to assemble, and even some simple puzzles to solve. You can encounter Nimble and have your first race in the Dry Canal, find the play coin for Rexro's arcade machine, purchase new abilities from Trowser, and so much more. And when the world is expanded, this becomes even more true and highlights how fun it is to explore. However, despite being a very solid stage, Tribal Stack Tropics is not perfect, and a few decisions had me scratching my head. The flower transformation comes to mind as a bad idea that isn't fun, and would be my pick for the worst transformation between Yooka Laylee and its predecessors. Not including Banjo-Tooie's convenient warp pads is something I question as well, considering how large they made the worlds in Yooka Laylee. And rehashing concepts like the race against Nimble feels somewhat lazy for the first world in the game. Still, Tribal Stack Tropics clearly had a ton of thought and care put into making the best first impression possible, and I think regardless of if you're a Banjo-Kazooie fan or not, this is a level that any platforming fan can enjoy. When I initially played Capital Casino, I really thought that it was going to be my least favorite stage in the game. Despite my love of gambling and casinos, the frustration I felt during the Cardos cart mission and the subsequent boss fight against Inept felt like it was going to be too much to overcome. It took me an excruciatingly long time to complete, and while I could just chalk that up to my lack of skill in the minecart, both sections felt like a big difficulty spike over previous boss battles and Cardos missions. But as I've sat with my experience with the level, I realized that just because I struggled, it doesn't necessarily mean that the sections I played were bad, as in the end it felt more rewarding to conquer a challenge that actually gave me some issues, even if I was caught off guard in the moment. In general, I value how I felt in the moment a little more than how I feel about something looking back at it objectively, because I think it's easy to rationalize something you didn't enjoy as being appropriate after the fact with context, but in this case I'm willing to make an exception. And I think the reason for that is that outside of those moments and getting Rextro's arcade high score, I think Capital Casino was the most fun world to collect everything in. Although there are some valid criticisms for this level in regards to the casino chips, I enjoyed that it tried to do something different from the other worlds. It immediately brought something unique to Capital Casino that set it apart from the rest of the game's stages and reinforced the level's theme in a really organic way. Much like a normal casino, it feels like you're getting constant hits of dopamine here, because now in addition to the excitement that comes with finding a Pagey or a Quill, we get to experience that same feeling when locating the casino chips as well. And while the instant gratification of getting a Pagey is nice, I actually found it more exciting whenever I would cross the threshold needed to turn my chips in for the same reward. Rather than other stages where I found myself wanting to move on after getting a certain number of Pages, it kept me invested in the various tasks throughout Capital Casino because I always wanted to reach that next goal. Now maybe I just have a gambling addiction and can't admit it yet, but I think it's more a credit to how the developers designed the level to reflect what it's like to be in an actual casino. There's always something drawing your attention that you feel compelled to go check out, whether it's a huge pair of golden dice on top of a house of cards, or a giant painting of Capital B, because you know there is a reward waiting for you when you get there. It makes exploration feel so natural and easy because not only are locations enticing, they're easily recognizable and help you map the layout of the world in your mind. What further helps navigation is the world's helicopter transformation that's useful for finding casino chips and getting you wherever you need to get quickly. Even though it's basically just a variation of Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie's B transformation, and doesn't really tie in with the level's theme, it actually makes the world feel more fun to traverse unlike the Piranha, Snowplow, and Flower forms that came before it. There's also something random about turning into an attack helicopter that seems on brand for this style of game, which makes me a little less critical of it than I might have been if this was a Mario game, for example. The only downside is that it quickly becomes obsolete once you learn how to fly, but those moments beforehand give you such a sense of freedom, which is why it's one of my favorite transformations in any collectathon I've ever played. Now, all that said, I don't want to get the impression that Capital Casino doesn't have any flaws, and I certainly acknowledge my bias for casino-themed levels. It suffers from many of the same problems that I talked about with Moody Maze Marsh and Galleon Galaxy as far as repetitiveness is concerned, and could have tried to do something a little bit more interesting with the casino theme. But there's no question that this is the stage I got the most enjoyment from, with my favorite music track of the 5 main worlds. It might not be a clear-cut favorite, or close to the best stage I've played in a collectathon, but it does a terrific job with its moment-to-moment gameplay, and is my pick for Yooka Laylee's best world. While Yooka Laylee was never destined to escape the shadow of Banjo-Kazooie, I think the worlds in this game are serviceable and get a little more hate than they deserve. It's true that there was a lot left on the table, and none of these levels will stand the test of time, but as a whole they provide a solid overall experience. Even if certain aspects can be disappointing, the game looks great, the music is enjoyable, and the goal of paying tribute to the N64 era was accomplished. If you've never played Yooka Laylee, you're really not missing out on much, but if you're a die-hard fan of the Banjo franchise, or collectathons in general, you could do worse things with your time than check out this nostalgic trip to the past.